additional changes to the plant that would allow for more flexible production, so that they would play to the potential. There's only 3 plants globally that makes the C class. It's Bremen in Germany, it's Beijing in China, and it's Buffalo City in South Africa. So I joked with them, you needed to be a city with a B to qualify for the C class. So they played to the idea that the customization would enable them to bring about refinement, so they could do short production runs with customized features. And so they added an additional 3 billion rand to the investment as an example. So if you take all of those additions, that added an extra 47.6 billion rand to the total. And so subtracting the cancellations, adding the expenditure that exceeded the original pledges, and adding further the announcements today has given us the figure that we finally announced, which is that we've gone just over 1.1 trillion rand. We've reached 95% of the 5-year target. I should also indicate that there were certain announcements that were made today that we've not counted in the total. We took out, for example, the commitment by Netflix and AT&T, because that's not really normal capital spending. Those would be working capital support, where basically you're making a movie, you're paying wages, you're procuring services, and so on. So it was a great announcement, because it was great that Netflix is going to commit essentially 1 billion rand to South Africa, but that we did not add to the totals. We've also not added, for example, the monies that the NEF and SEFA has made available to small businesses, because similarly a lot of that money, not all, but a fair bit of that would be working capital. We've excluded also investments that were simply the rebuilding of facilities that were damaged during the July unrest last year, because we are trying to look at how to measure the increase in the overall stock of capital. There are a number of other projects that are close to completion that we took the decision not to add today. For example, there's a big announcement that the Foschini Group is about to make. There are also a number of renewable energy projects where the preferred bidders have been identified in the REAP program, but it's subject to financial close. So financial close will come fairly imminently, and that of course will boost the numbers significantly, but we can wait until next year to make those announcements. So I thought I should provide a little bit of context to some of the numbers, and just see if there are any questions that members of the media had. Bongani, that really was the opportunity this evening, just for a short engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister. Colleagues, can we take questions just in an attempt to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity, and to save time, we will take them in batches of 3. So as usual, you identify yourself and the media, then you ask a question for now. Thank you. Yeah, there's coming behind you.
Okay. Helmer Price at the BRICS Post. Minister, given all these announcements, why is Treasury and most economists so negative on gross fixed capital formation?
Thank you. Can we check there? There you go.
I'll hold it.
Hi, it's Carol Patton from News 24. I'm going to ask 2 questions because he stole my one. But
so you had 3.
No. So I'm just going to improve on his by saying we don't see it in the numbers. You don't actually see as Mamacheti Lejani was saying, you don't see it. We are at 16% of GDP when it comes to gross capital formation. So you don't seeing these things in the numbers. Why is that? And then the other question is just in terms of what is cancelled. If you have it at the top of your head, or hopefully. But was the Saudi that Saudi refinery, that Saudi Aramco refinery, included in these pledges? And that's no longer happening. If you could just clarify what's not happening anymore. Thanks.
Thank you, Minister. Can we just take one more? Gentleman behind you.
Good evening. My name is Veli Mtiane from the SABC News. First question would be, out of those that have been cancelled, I think it's the same question that she asked, but could you give us those companies, what they had promised, what was cancelled? Perhaps they cancelled partially, or they delivered less than what they had promised. We need details on that, please. And then secondly, the issue about some of the projects that have taken place but failed. A case in point would be the Marathon factory in Durban. We know that that factory is no longer there, but they were part of the investment pledges, I think that took place in 2018. More details on that, Minister. Thank you.
Thank you, Veli. Minister? We'll take another round.
Okay, I think there's another question.
We'll take another round.
Oh, I see. Okay. First, thank you very much for the questions. Let me start with the cancellations one. I don't know, Chris, if Eunice is available. I had a list here, but in the rush to get here, I haven't carried my list with me. We can make that list available. The one that does strike me is the Mara phones. We've taken out of the numbers because effectively that investment has not been sustained. So that would be one example of it. I'm happy to make the list of exclusions available. Of course, I hope, and this is me more doing what you'd expect me to do, that this storyline is not about the 12.9 billion rand of cancellations, but I think it is important that we acknowledge when investments don't work. It's the nature of a market economy, that you're not going to get everything right. You need to get most things right. You've got to get the aggregate levels rising, and then be open when things just don't work out. Let me then go to the second question, which is I think I've covered the SABC questions also with that one. Then the second question is on the gross fixed capital formation and the Saudi project. I'm going to ask again that the team just guides me on the Saudi one, whether we added that in the numbers, but I will just see if... great. These are the cancellations that I've got here. So I can make it available. It's a longish list, but let me just give you a few examples. So in the case of Adcock Ingram, they reduced the amount by 5 million. For Bradley Aviation Manufacturing, it was a reduction of 134 million. Cable Tapes Africa, 120 million. French companies, you recall at one of our investment conferences like today, the French companies made an overall commitment, and so they've reduced that overall commitment by 482 million. There's a growth point. Heineken has also reduced. There's a big story around Heineken. We'll be making a big announcement about fresh investment. So if in one project they scale down that project, we want to take that figure out. But in the case of Heineken, they will be making a very big announcement of additional investment, but it just wasn't ripe enough. They still need to go through one or two regulatory hoops. So while it was something that we could see will happen, we felt don't make that announcement today. Let them go through the regulatory hoops, and at the end of that, you can see it. They may have alluded to that in the statement they made when they put in the bid for, of course, Distel. Moving on to a few more of these examples. It includes Mara, so we've taken the whole of the Mara figure out. MA Automotives, it was just a small reduction. So in that case, it was 142,000 Rand. But because the figures were lower than the pledge, we just decided to take it out. I can give you a few examples. Ceretic Coal reduced the amount. Toronto Group, a small reduction. Tourvest, that was that commitment was made before COVID, and of course, COVID changed the storyline for tourism. Transnet reduced their amount, VM Automotive. So I think the best would be to make this available to members of the media, and I'm going to ask the team just to see if that could still go out this evening, even if it's in raw form, just this list. We can always do a better context tomorrow to it. On the gross fixed capital formation, I think this is an area that we need to look at a little bit as government. Obviously, one of the issues that we constantly need to address is we count additions to the stock of capital. And we don't look at when there is any divestiture or divestment from the country rather. We don't look at any closures. So as our system gets built up, we would be able to do that. I think the storyline around gross fixed capital formation is the one that, as a country, we have to pay a lot more attention to, because it's if we can move that needle, that we are able to get growth on a more sustainable path. You will recall that the National Development Plan's big story, if you wanted to extract what it said about growth, it was fundamentally about shifting the model from consumption-led, which means it runs for a little bit and then it runs out of steam, to a much more investment-led growth path. And the NDB, the plan had as its core that we needed to benchmark our investment as a percentage of GDP. So I think there's a lot that we need to do to get that as part of the measure in future. What these investments often involve, maybe one point that came out in the little video that was screened this morning that I want to highlight is, of the 774 billion rand of past pledges, 40 billion of that has now gone through the system. In other words, the expenditure has taken place. I've looked carefully at that. Some of it would come back to our gross fixed capital formation numbers. So a shaft is dug, a factory is built, a car production plant is completely repurposed. Some of it would be purchase of capital equipment, and that capital equipment may be an imported machine or product. I've seen one commentator was concerned about it and said, well, take into account that some of your announcements may be about imported capital equipment. And I think it's a fair point. But of course, for me, the key is that machine becomes part of the wealth-creating machinery of the country. And so while I would favor that it be purchased locally, you'd expect me to do that. At the same time, of course, when we don't produce those capital goods, it's still vital that we have them in our workplaces, in our minds, and so on. So I'm going to have another look as we do the wrap-up report next year for the commitment the President has done, and just dig a little bit more into this and see what other learnings and insights are we getting out of this. 40% of that 774 billion has been actually spent. That means 60% of it is still going through the process. Why would that be the case? Well, one of it is there was a little bit of slowdown in the early period of COVID. Some construction sites were actually just physically stopped as a result of either lockdowns or a growing number of workers who contracted COVID, or sensed by investors that their business case for that investment would now be stretched over a longer period because of the disruption to the economy. We're seeing in the last number of, I guess, 8 months, 9 months, a speeding up now of those projects. So we were quite delighted. It was even before the latest announcement by the President on the regulations that we saw businesses were coming back. If I had to find a way of connecting it to something external, I think it was the vaccines made the big difference. That investors, when they saw that we were able to procure vaccines and the rollout began, there was a massive return of confidence. Yes, affected by the events of July last year, so it dipped a little bit after that, but we're seeing that confidence coming back. You've seen the confidence in indices, so you'd be able to have a look at that. I hope that covers the questions that were asked.
Thank you, Minister.
Can I just give a follow-up in terms of your own internal, what's your growth forecast in terms of growth fixed capital formation?
Any others?
Okay. Can I take the two ladies at the back, or the lady and gentleman?
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Minister Patel, it's Natasha Perry here from SABC News. In terms of investment.
All right, that's the Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Ebrahim Patel. They're talking to the media about some of the updates. Of course, talking about all-important question around the cancellation of some of the pledges, saying that these are totaling around 12.9 billion rand.